Hi, this is Phil Kerner, the Tool and Die Guy, and today's video features a recap from a lesson we had last week, a brand new tip, and my miniature tool and die shop. So let's get started. So last week's video featured these angle blocks. Some of you might refer to them as wedge blocks, and I had been talking about how I used to grind carbon, but I thought you guys might get a kick out of this. This is my original sketch that I did for these, and I was trained as a draftsman, so I loved doing stuff like this. If you can look too, these aren't hand drawn. These are you can see my lines to extend my isometric here, and this was awarded $35 back in 1980. I did this. I was 20 years old, and laid out my case, for my $35 reward, which is about $100 today. And I even did a second page to show them how to use them. And again, they had 6 sets made. I made my own set, and they've served me very well for many, many years now. Okay, so closing in on 40 years. Wow. So let's move on to last week's lesson, which sounds redundant, but there we have the piece of graphite that I had spray painted with some Marsh stencil ink. And I was talking to you guys about how close you could grind to a line with a good fine line and on carbon in a thin coat of paint. So there we've got the height gauge out. That's my Greist micro height gauge, vintage classic height gauge there. And let's take a look at that, and there you have it. There's a line up a ½ inch. So I said I might take this to work and grind it, and let's see how accurate it is. Well, I did it. So there it is, set up in one of my little grinding vices at 5 degrees. I'm using a magnet on the end as a stop for that, and very, very thin line. You can see that, right? Now, I will tell you, I'm ashamed to admit that grinding to a line 20 years ago, when my eyes were 20 years younger, was a much more pleasurable experience. Okay, but we got it done. Okay, so this is what it looks like with the draft on it. So the next thing is, let's take this off and take it into the inspection room and take a look at it under the comparator. And you can see down here the comparator set at 0. I've got the edge of the electrode set on the crosshairs here. And if we move down to the end of the draft that I ground on, we got a ½ inch. Okay. And that could probably go a thou or so each way. And the last thing I could do is ball check it. But believe me, the work I did in the injection mold building industry, if I would have got caught ball checking draft on the electrodes, they wouldn't have been real happy. Okay, so it was close enough for the work I did. A lot of automotive, big radiator molds, big toy molds. It worked well. So again, that's kind of the proof in the pudding. You can grind very closely to a scribe line, and much better when your eyes are in your 30s, though. Okay, so today's lesson. This little piece of brass here, all right, I had to make about 10 or 12 of these things, and interestingly enough, pretty simple part, right? I've got, they just cut these off. I think they cut them off in the saw for me, left a little bit on the ends, and I've got to take down the thickness, but the big deal is on this thickness or height, whatever you want to call it here, is this angle with a little radius at the top. So let's take a look at the actual parts here so you can get a little bit of a scale to these. So they're small. Okay, that's a dime there. That gives you some perspective. And again, the challenge here is how to hold these things to put this angle on. And again, I know you guys are really smart and you may have already figured this out, but I always like to show you what I kind of came up with on the fly. So basically, this is a set of, I would call them soft jaws, sacrifice jaws. You can see we've used these for a lot of parts, but so I had already milled the ends here, all right, and now I milled the slot in the bottom of the part. In hindsight, I would have machined that second, but I didn't, because we'll see in the next photo, when I put these 2 indents in the back, I risked possibly squeezing this part and bending it with this channel already in it. So next time I will reverse that process, but that's just the way it worked out. But what I was really struggling with was how was I going to put that shape on the face. Well, this is what I came up with. And there you have it. I've got a parallel you can see down here in this vise, and I've got a stop here on the right. I was able to calculate out a parallel and put a pin into that slot I had machined, and machine half of this, the angle, radius in the middle, okay, and then just flip it over and do the other side. And that's what it looks like when it's done. So that is one way to skin a cat, okay, as they said in the old days. And that's what it looks like when it's finished. And there's a picture of the actual pin. It looks like a about a 3/16 pin fit in there just right. Everything worked out just fine. And, that radius is a 1/16 of an inch radius, and that angle, I think the drop was 1/1004. Very slight radius. Almost could have just barely touched that with a piece of sandpaper and put it on, but that's how I did it. Now, here's a side shot. I quickly just laid this out in AutoCAD. There's this big piece here and this big piece. Those are my vice jaws, okay? 2 inches by 1 inch vice jaws. This thing that looks like a section view, I just put that on it so it stand out. That's my parallel. And there you can see my piece, which I've shaded black, and the dowel pin in the middle, which is showing the, that's how I clamped it. So as you can see, when the end mill would come down, got to be careful here. Just miss the pin, dowel pin, don't want to hit that with an ML, don't want to hit the top of the vise, but there was enough clearance there, about 20 thousandths I believe in there, that I could machine that angle on. So I hope that helps. That's the tip of the day. Let's move on to some miscellaneous stuff that I think you guys might get a kick out of. I posted some photo on Instagram the other day, and this is a fun story. These my miniature tool room, okay? And people really get a charge out of these, and it's such an innocent story. Many, many years ago, when I apprenticed at Anson Tools and Gauges, and eventually in 1991, I started my own shop. In 1994, we moved into our first big building, and we were trying to kind of figure out where to put the equipment. And I don't know how I remembered it, but I remembered Anson's had these models, and they're 1/4-inch scale models of all these machines. So I called down to Anson's, and they said, sure, you can borrow them. And that's kind of the end of the story, because the employees had just bought Anson's out from the owners, and the owner's dead now. There was one daughter; she had no interest. I have no idea where she ever ended up, and since that time, it was bought out again and finally closed. So they forgot about it. I forgot about it, and I ended up with these really fun models. So I thought I'd show you a few of my favorite ones here. Surface grinders, and got a little larger one over here. I believe that was a model of, it might have been we had a grinder called a Covel, Covel, I believe. And I think that was our big Thompson wet grinder. And then got a bandsaw, a little Johnson horizontal bandsaw there. And then some lathes, engine lathes, and nice detail on these things, right? And let's see here. I don't even know if people use radial drill presses anymore, but boy, we drilled a lot of holes in bowl bases with radial drill presses back in the day. And then there's a ghost from the past, the Shaper. And finally, we've got a row of Bridgeports, and got to have drill presses, right, to get your countersinks in and things like that. That's one of the first things I had to do when we were apprentices, is little stuff like that. And a couple of engraving machines. I believe those are both Gorton's. And old horizontal milk, just for slabbing blocks down. Couple of Kearney Trekker rotary mills, and I owned one of those, and those were really nice mills. And that's what we, instead of using a rotary table, the spindle moved out. You could set the radius and then crank this table, this knob right here, and cut arcs with the head of this machine. It was a really well-built machine. You couldn't even hear the spindle run. Sun and Hone. You don't see jig bores much anymore, but there's one for you. Cincinnati Hydrotel. And look at the detail on that. That's a Cincinnati monoset for grinding your cutters. So if we fast forward to today, unbelievably, oh, one more. Did I miss one? Let's see, that's a cylindrical grinder. Oh, and finally, this one, little pedestal grinders. I believe these two are cutter grinders, and that's a little pedestal grinder. Okay, sorry about that. And this is what it looks like today, neatly stored in a box. And I know a lot of people probably think, why don't you have those on display? Because they're dust magnets. My studio is pretty packed anyways, and if I ever build or buy a glass case, actually Gerster sells a display table with a glass top. These would be perfect under that. So, hey, if anybody wants me to buy me a $1,500 Gerstner glass top oak table, we'll do it, okay? Let me know. Email me. And, of course, by the time I started my shop, we had some CNCs, so I built some scale models here out of just some wood. It's a couple EDM machines, a couple Fadals at the time. We had a spotting press for checking, validating our mold shutoffs, and a couple of mold racks. Just threw these together, but they were to scale. So here's how I use those. This is a huge drawing, all right? But this is just basically I would lay out and put my machines just like you would think it would work. And I moved my shop twice and used these models both times I set up my shop, and they worked great. You can use paper and everything, but there's something about having those physical models that just made it so much easier. And the wiring was pre-done. When those machines rolled in, they were up and running in hours because everything fit where it was supposed to. And I thought you guys might also get a kick out of this. In the bottom corner of that sketch, those were all my tool makers at the time, and I wanted to make sure every one of them got a bench. And if it didn't have a check mark next to it, it means I needed to buy a couple more benches, I believe. All right, but there's some handwriting from the past, getting close to 30 years now, of just the guys I used to employ, and just a bit of history. It brought back some memories for me. I forgot I had written that down in the corner of the